Last time, we talked about how God created the world and all that is in it, how He created it good. We talked about how He created man, Adam and Eve, very good. He gave them an intellect and a will to know Him and to choose freely to love Him and to follow His will. God also gave Adam and Eve other special gifts. They had a body and could enjoy eating fruit, smelling the flowers, hearing the birds chirp, and seeing the beauty of God's creation. In some, they could experience the fullness of what God had created for them. Today, we're going to talk about how Adam and Eve chose to use those gifts. But before we do that, there's something else I need to tell you about first. Besides man, God had also created angels. Angels have an intellect and a will, but they do not have bodies. They do have a free will to choose to love God, but sadly, some of the angels chose not to say yes to God's amazing love and turned away from friendship with Him. We call these angels who said no to God's love the demons, or the bad angels. In particular, there was the fallen archangel Lucifer, whose name meant bearer of light. But Lucifer, or Satan, is now the prince of darkness. His heart was full of envy and pride, and he was jealous and envious that Adam and Eve had this special friendship with God. Satan, in the form of the serpent, was envious that the world was created for man. So he sought to destroy that special friendship between Adam and Eve and God. Now remember, God had given Adam and Eve the ability to know and to choose, and they used these gifts to listen and to freely obey God. The word obey comes from a Latin word that means to hear or to listen. God gave Adam and Eve only one command to obey, to listen to. He told them, "You shall not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When you eat from it, you shall die." As long as Adam and Eve kept God's command, they would continue to be His friends, sharing His life of sanctifying grace, and they would never die. But the serpent, the father of lies, was envious. He whispered lies and caused Eve to doubt God's goodness. He planted a seed of doubt in her mind, a seed of doubt that made her not want to trust God. Eve looked at the forbidden fruit. She saw that it looked good. She wanted it. Eve began to doubt that God's way was best. She decided to disobey God's command and choose her own way. Every sin is just like this. We choose our own way, something that looks good to us but isn't in God's plan, instead of listening to God. So Eve took some of the fruit and ate it. She also gave some to Adam, her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Now, God had told Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. By their disobedience and listening to another voice, Adam and Eve freely chose to break off their friendship with God. They chose not to care about His gift of sanctifying grace, sharing His very life, and instead, they chose death. At that moment, everything changed. Everything was in chaos. Remember how, before the fall, Adam and Eve walked and talked with God in the garden? Because they broke off their friendship by sin, Adam and Eve no longer heard the same loving voice of God. They became afraid of Him. They were also no longer at peace with each other. Now they argued and fought. They misunderstood each other sometimes and were suspicious of each other. They hurt each other by selfish words and actions. The peace within creation was also destroyed. The animals were no longer friendly to Adam and Eve, and creation didn't obey them. Finally, Adam and Eve weren't at peace with themselves. Cut off from God, they now had trouble knowing the truth with their intellects and recognizing what was good. They also had much more difficulty choosing to do what was right. They now suffered, got hurt, and would one day die. Because of their guilt and shame, Adam and Eve tried to hide from God. Have you ever done something wrong and then been so ashamed and embarrassed that you tried to hide from your mom or your dad? It was a little bit like that. But God, who is ever faithful and always present, still came to walk with them in the garden as he had always done. He said, "Where are you?" God's tone of voice had not changed. It was still the voice of great love. But Adam and Eve heard it differently, and they were afraid. It's like when you've done something wrong, and you're afraid when you hear the voice of your grandparent or your parent. Now God asked Adam and Eve questions and wanted to give them the opportunity to explain what had happened. But Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent. And so, God first punished that sneaky snake, the father of lies, Satan. God told him that his head would be crushed one day by a woman. Who do you think this woman that God is promising is? That's right, Mary, the mother of Jesus. What is so amazing is that God was already at this moment starting his loving plan of salvation to bring us, his sons and daughters, back into friendship with him. His promise that a woman would crush the head of the serpent would be fulfilled in Mary, the mother of Jesus, who would conquer Satan and the powers of death. However, since Adam and Eve had listened to another voice and disobeyed God, they also had to experience the consequences of their sin. They had to leave the Garden of Eden until the time when God would send his Son, the promised Savior, Jesus.